Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Liverpool.com podcast with myself, Keifer, MacDonald and Tom Beattie. It's been a good few days for the Reds, Tom. How are you feeling?
Yeah, really positive. Obviously, it keeps rolling on, doesn't it, under the new manager? Coming off the back of the Brighton game. I think it's 14 wins now, isn't it? On the board for the new manager as well. So, yeah, couldn't be more positive, I think. And I think we're top of the European table and the league table as well. So, yeah, couldn't have really gone any better, I think, the kind of past week.
Absolutely. And before we get into last night and touch a bit on Saturday's win over Brighton, shout out to our sponsors, NordVPN. To get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/bloodred, and our link will give you 4 extra months on a 2-year plan, and there's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link to that can be found in the podcast episode description box. So, Tom, we'll start with last night. It was an emphatic win for Liverpool in the Champions League, as you say, going top of the new-look Champions League format, league table, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it was, to be cliche, it was a game of two halves, wasn't it? But Luis Diaz stole the show in that second half. I mean, his first hat-trick for Liverpool, the first player to score a European hat-trick at Anfield since Felipe Coutinho in December 2017. I mean, what a performance from the Colombian that was.
Yeah, incredible. And like you say, first half, it was very balanced, weren't it, the game? And I felt that Leverkusen, they came into it. Obviously, they had a goal chalked off for offside. But yeah, second half, I think as soon as Liverpool got a goal, that kind of set the ball rolling after that. And yeah, it did turn into a bit of a demolition job. And I just felt every time that we went forward, we were going to either kind of trouble the goalkeeper or score. And that seems to be the way under Slot, doesn't it? Kind of defensively, everything's really compact and, there's a lot of balance in that back four. But I think going forward, they have that bit of freedom. And we saw that last night again. And, Diaz obviously playing a bit of an unfamiliar position as a centre forward. Like you said there was a bit of a game of two halves. I think the first half, they were kind of finding the feet with it. But yeah, as soon as he got his goal, yeah, it seemed to open the floodgates. And, we grew in confidence after that, I thought. And yeah, just a great performance all round.
Absolutely. As you touched on earlier, we're 16 games into Slot's reign as Liverpool manager. And obviously, it's not a huge sample size when you compare it to the likes of Jurgen Klopp, who had 7, 8, 9 years. But I think one of the kind of themes we are starting to notice is that Liverpool are very much becoming a second half team. And there was a lot of talk about that, towards the back of Jurgen Klopp's tenure when, typically we didn't start too well and we were almost chasing games, especially when you think towards the back of the last season, the games against Sheffield United and Luton. But I think with Slot, and I'd be interested to kind of know what your take on it is, but there's been a lot of talk of kind of how he sets his teams up in the first half. He seems to almost be happy to absorb the pressure. Liverpool feel a lot more compact defensively this year. Trent Alexander-Arnold is defending better. Kostas Tsimikas was good again last night. Van Dijk and Konate have been, probably the best defensive partners in the Premier League. And especially if you look at the stats as well, Liverpool have been regularly shading possession in the second half. Last night, Leverkusen had 57% possession in the first half to Liverpool's 43%, and then in the second half, Liverpool shaded 52-48. They also have more passes, which obviously shows the ball is being zipped around more, with more purpose and pace to it, and that was kind of, even if you were to do it on the eye test and not look at the stats, that was noticeable in the play. I mean, that ball from Curtis Jones for the first goal at the start of the second half was absolutely brilliant, and I think that was what was lacking in the first half, a bit of pace, a bit of impetus, and Liverpool delivered that. And it was quite interesting actually because Slot touched on it in his post-match press conference, basically said that Leverkusen's tactics caught them out almost. They went with 2 almost wide forwards and then put an extra body in midfield, and that way Liverpool weren't really able to close the spare man. But Slot said that they were able to evaluate that and look at that during the first 45, and then in this once they had an understanding of it and they were able to communicate out to the players at half time, Liverpool came out and obviously had identified those weaknesses and they were obviously able to capitalise on it. But I just wondered what your thoughts were kind of on Liverpool almost being happy to surrender the ball in the first half and then come out, much more alive in the second.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, to be honest. I think even going back to the Chelsea game a couple of weeks ago, that seemed to be the emphasis as well. We kind of soak up pressure a little bit and almost allow them to kind of dominate that possession in the first half. And we've certainly seen that in that game as well. But yeah, I felt that last night as well. It was very open. I thought the game, and there were a couple of moments for them sort of on the break where you thought something could happen for them. But yeah, I think it is interesting how, like you say, second half, I think once he's kind of digested everything, Slot, and he's kind of took in what the opposition's about, I think things often look different. And it does seem to be as well. It's quite strange how as soon as Liverpool get that first goal, they then seem to have that impetus and that bit of kind of, domination within the game. And sort of that pendulum swung, I thought, last night as well. As soon as we got that first goal, it did seem like everything kind of went in Liverpool's favour after then. And that happened in the Brighton game as well. Obviously, as soon as we did get that first goal, the second one from Salah ended up being the winner, didn't it? And that came, I think, 3 or 4 minutes later. So it was kind of a similar story last night again. And yeah, it does seem quite interesting with Slot that he's kind of willing to see what's kind of out in front of him and, see it kind of with a fresh pair of eyes, I think, every single game. And he'll kind of adapt to suit within the game as well. So he's quite flexible in that respect. And yeah, like you say, I think they kind of set up in a way that we weren't expecting. Obviously, normally Boniface would be that kind of centre forward. He went out to the left, didn't he? And I think basically Alonso didn't fancy him up against Konate and Van Dijk for them kind of aerial duels. So I think Liverpool have been really impressive in that regard, other than kind of the first game of the season where Slot was very open about that we weren't kind of winning them aerial duels kind of in that first half. But I think since then, that defensive pairing's been pretty kind of impenetrable, and, it's far and away been the best in the league domestically. So, yeah, I think Alonso kind of adapted to suit in that regard. But yeah, they weren't kind of getting much joy, I'd say, out of playing that system as well. And, I think we did kind of capitalise second half and, got on the ball a lot more, and we were creating chances. And, I think that's what you want to see. And, it was quite entertaining as well, I thought, second half. We were kind of rushing forward and you felt that we were going to score on every attack, like I said. So, yeah, I thought it was a really positive showing from Liverpool last night.
And someone who's very much into your music, if the Jurgen Klopp era was heavy metal football, what are we describing the Arne Slot reign so far as?
It's more like an orchestra, isn't it? A bit of a crescendo at the end, seems to be.
Well, as long as we'll be fairly happy with that, won't we? I mean, as you say,
yeah,
the first 10 minutes last night were a bit cagey, I thought, end to end. But then I thought Leverkusen did quite well. I thought Xhaka, a player who Liverpool fans will know quite well from his time at Arsenal, I thought he was quite influential. Everything seemed to go through him. Obviously, Frimpong was a bit of an outlet for them, but I thought it was quite interesting as well. We talk about Alonso changing his kind of style and stuff. Slot mentioned after the game how obviously Liverpool are without Diogo Jota at the moment, so they are having to rely on Darwin Núñez as their only central, kind of normal striker. What he did do, though, was he put Luis Diaz up there against Jonathan Tah, and his kind of explanation for that was, if he'd put Gakpo down the middle, which is something Klopp did a lot during his time as Liverpool manager, and maybe probably would have put Diaz out on the left. And he basically said it was an easier job for Tah to do. Gakpo's a big head fella, isn't he? He's obviously going to go up for duels and stuff. Yeah. He's going to be easy to mark. You can touch, you can feel him. But with Diaz, it was almost a bit of a throwback to Roberto Firmino and how Liverpool used to line up under Slot as a bit of a false nine. I mean, Slot talked about him going into midfield and drifting from wide areas and just being harder to mark and a bit of a nuisance. And not only that, you get the aerial advantage from Gakpo out on the left against, Grimaldo and stuff. So I just wonder what your take was on that, seeing Diaz down the middle, and do you think that could be an option for Liverpool going forward, even when Jota and Núñez are kind of back from, obviously Núñez is, obviously when Slot has more, forward options. Do you think it'll be a case of horses for courses and just kind of taking each game as it comes, or do you think you'll stick with Jota and Núñez?
I thought it was really interesting last night that, he kind of plumbed for that from where it going. I felt the weird point in the first half where there seemed to be that little bit of interchange from obviously Gakpo and Diaz. They seemed to be kind of swapping in and out at stages in that first half. But I thought second half, when they were more fixed in the positions, like you said, it kind of resembled the Roberto Firmino role a little bit with Diaz, where he kind of had his back to goal a couple of times. And I thought even when Núñez came on, that was interesting to see how that kind of played out as well, where, he was kind of showing for the ball. And I think he showed that pretty much since the Chelsea game, Núñez, whenever he's been on the pitch, his hold-up play has been really strong. So I think Slot's got a lot of options to work with now. And, I've said a couple of times before, it's a great kind of problem for him to have, the manager, where obviously Jota's out injured at the moment, but, there is a kind of, embarrassment of riches for Liverpool in the forward line at the moment. And I think you see him with our rivals, City are kind of struggling with injuries and that sort of thing. Arsenal coming into the game against us, they had a couple of injuries as well. So, just kind of keeping players fit and having them available options, it's really kind of paying dividends, I think, at the moment. And to be able to have a player like Gakpo come in, with that amount of quality, he's showing it pretty much every week now, and it's such a positive, I think, for Liverpool, that. And, it was interesting to see last night kind of how that played out. Obviously, second half, you couldn't fault it. Obviously, a hat-trick for Diaz and a goal for Gakpo as well. So, yeah, I would actually like to see that happen again, I think, sort of, moving forward. Maybe that is an experiment that Slot kind of pursues. And, it is an extra option at the end of the day. And we know how good Gakpo can be from that left-hand side. And also through the middle, we knew last season that he can do a job there. So, yeah, there's a lot of options, I think, for the manager. And, it is a great problem for him to have. We've got a lot of games coming up as well. And obviously, there's a lot of eyes on the end of the month, isn't there, with City and Real Madrid kind of back-to-back as well. So I think he'll be kind of rotating the squad to suit over the coming weeks. And obviously there's a big game at the weekend as well with Villa. So yeah, that's coming thick and fast. And having that amount of options, I think, is a major positive for the manager at the moment.
Absolutely. And that's been one thing that I've been really impressed with in the Slot reign so far, is just, we know Klopp was kind of able to get the best out of players and probably get more out of players than any manager would have been able to, just because of, he made every player feel 10 foot tall and they wanted to run through brick walls for him. And obviously that, yields better performances and team cohesion and stuff. But I've been really impressed with already the buy-in that the Liverpool players are showing with Slot. But not only that, the actual individual improvements and the tactical changes he's made. I mean, you talk about Gakpo there, and I'm not really sure what he's done specifically. I know obviously he's playing him on the left a bit more, but I always think of that the United collapse in the FA Cup, in March, and I remember Gakpo came on and he kind of got ripped to pieces by Carragher on social media, who just said that Liverpool are a lot slower in attack when Gakpo's there. He's very hesitant. He doesn't really know he doesn't have the fluidity that maybe a Diaz or a Jota or whoever might have. And he just kind of looked out of place, out of sorts. He was kind of devoid of confidence. And, he was almost like Liverpool's cup striker. You think of the goal he scored on the way to winning the League Cup. I think he scored in all the rounds apart from the final. Even this year already, and you could notice it as early as September when they played AC Milan, he just looks a lot quicker, a lot sharper. He almost looks like he's buying into this project. And I don't know if it's, this Dutch simple to put it down to, but clearly Slot is buying into him, and not only him. You look at Trent Alexander-Arnold. Yes, we might not be getting the the attacking exploits that we've had from him in recent seasons, but defensively, I think he's come on leaps and bounds. And in 3 or 4 months of working with Slot, you think Tsimikas as well over the last few games, he's proved again that he can be an option and he can be trusted. Curtis Jones as well. I mean, he said in the pre-season, didn't he, that he thinks Slot style would suit him more than Klopp. So I think there's already 5 or 6 players you could look at in a Liverpool squad and say. Obviously Gravenberch is probably the prime example, but there's so many players you can look at and say Slot is just, by being here 3 or 4 months and making, tactical changes to their game, he's really improved them. And I hate to use the same, but a few of these players are coming and they almost feel like new signings because they're taking their game to levels that we perhaps didn't realize they could go to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you say, the buy-in from a number of players has been incredible, really. And, you can go through that team last night, like you did there. Tsimikas, I think, appears to be kind of growing into that role at left-back where, he's kind of been rotating them, hasn't he, with Andy Robertson this season. And it's another option at the end of the day. And I think that's always a positive. And, yeah, if you go through the team, Gravenberch, was being incredible, might end up saving Liverpool a lot of money in the transfer market. We know the going rate for a player in that position seems to be kind of upwards almost of 100 million. Obviously, Rodri, is kind of the standout in that position, but Declan Rice went for 100 million and obviously Moises Caicedo as well. So, yeah, it might end up saving Liverpool a lot of money at the end of the day. And yeah, Curtis Jones, I thought last night, absolutely incredible again. I thought the assist for Diaz's first goal, was sublime, really. And, he's always had that in his locker, I think, kind of the creativity and that side of his game. But, yeah, he does seem like it's really suiting him, kind of that number 10 role now. Obviously, we've seen it in the Chelsea game where he sort of had the game of his life didn't he? He was everywhere that night, and yeah, he's done really well since then as well. So yeah, there's a lot of players in that team at the moment where they do seem like they're playing with a lot of confidence, and to be fair to Slot, obviously Klopp got a lot of praise quite rightly for sort of the motivational side of his sort of management, but I think Slot, just through how kind of organised he seems to be and the coaching side of it. Obviously, we had that bit of insight about Trent the other week as well, where he was sort of saying about how he could sort of adapt his game and kind of the man management side of that as well. So I've been really impressed overall with the manager and just kind of the tune he's getting out of all these players. And, obviously you need a lot of luck along the way. So, injuries is kind of playing in Liverpool's favour at the moment. But, at the end of the day, he's rotating the squad really well as well, which I think's kind of gone under the radar a little bit. In terms of people's kind of analysis of the manager as well. Like even last night, he brought Trent off and Conor Bradley came on and done really well. And obviously the goalkeeper situation with injuries, we've had to rotate there and Kelleher's came in and done really well. So there's been a lot of that, I think, this season where, whenever someone's been called upon, they've always been able to deliver. And I think that, that's kind of props to the manager as well, where, he is getting that tune out of players and people are willing to kind of wait for their opportunity to come about, and they seem to be taking it when it does come as well.
Absolutely, and I think last night was a really significant game, maybe not in the context of the wider Champions League, because, we know now there's an extra 2 games for Liverpool to qualify, and we fully expect them, based on how they started the previous 3 games of the campaign, that they will kind of finish in that top 8. But I think in terms of Slot, and maybe for Liverpool fans as well, I just thought it was quite significant and quite poignant as well that, Xabi Alonso was coming back to Anfield, and kind of all the discourse that happened earlier this year about, perhaps Liverpool were looking at him initially, and then, he kind of ruled himself out of the running. So I was really impressed with how Slot handled that, and also Alonso as well, to his credit. I thought, he was really self-aware in both press conferences, pre and post-match. Very full of praise for Slot, but I also feel for Slot that'll probably count as like, you talk about the victory over Chelsea, the victory over United being like early kind of, Horcruxes, if you almost like, in his reign kind of thing, of like things he can kind of take. I thought last night was that, because to kind of beat Alonso, who's been dubbed as probably the best up and coming manager in Europe, what Leverkusen have done over the last 18 months as well. I think that was only their 3rd defeat since May 2023. They got to the Europa League final last year. They won the Bundesliga and German Cup double. I mean, just to get a win over Alonso would be huge. Never mind Leverkusen, whoever Alonso was managing, that is just huge for Slot. And also, he doesn't strike me as an insecure person or someone who kind of needs vindication that he's doing a good job. But I think if he did, that last night certainly delivered that. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, obviously what he's done at Leverkusen, you've got to take your hat off to him, because, to go unbeaten in the league last season, get to the Europa League final, and obviously win the German Cup as well. I think we were all a little bit worried about what we were going to come up against last night. And, I thought first half they played really well, but yeah, it's a massive marker, I think, what Liverpool did second half there. And it shows kind of, the quality of Slot as a manager, where, Leverkusen were made to look like, a sort of a lower down kind of Premier League side, I thought, second half, and that's credit to Slot again. I thought we really dominated the game, and they didn't look like scoring other than the opportunity. I thought there was a double save, wasn't there, towards the end. But yeah, it's a massive marker, and obviously there was that emotional connection or emotional value to the game last night with Alonso kind of having a bit of a homecoming at Anfield. And yeah, I thought both managers, to be fair to them, dealt with that really well in the press, I thought, kind of coming into the game. And obviously there was a nice reception for Alonso, I thought, when the game was kind of done, which was nice to see. But yeah, I think it's credit to the manager, really, in terms of Slot there. He was able to harness the kind of energy in Anfield last night. And I thought, credit to the fans as well there. I thought they kind of carried that victory. Yeah, it's one of them where I think, obviously, the fans probably wouldn't be singing Alonso's name if we were kind of 4-0 down the other way. So yeah, again, that's probably credit to Slot that, that he got the victory in the end. And yeah, a massive marker, I think, in his tenure, because a lot of people obviously, said recently, he hasn't had that kind of big marker in terms of victories, but he's beaten obviously the German champions there who went unbeaten. He's beaten Manchester United. He's beaten Chelsea. He got a decent draw away at Arsenal as well. So he's showing every week, I think, that he's able to churn out results. And yeah, I thought that was a massive statement last night.
Absolutely. I think if maybe Liverpool fans weren't circling it as a big game, I think Slot certainly would have been when the fixture list came out back in August. But that fixture was almost halfway, we'll say, between this kind of nightmare run that everyone kind of expected Liverpool maybe to trip up on some way along the way. Starting after the most recent international break, that game against Chelsea, and probably finishing with that game at Goodison Park at the start of December. I mean, that was like a 10 or an 11, 12 game run, whatever it was. And obviously Liverpool probably about halfway through that at the minute where, as I say, people probably thought Liverpool would, maybe not in the Champions League, but certainly in the Premier League, maybe give way at some point. You look at especially that week towards the end of the month where, Real Madrid on the Wednesday, Manchester City on the Sunday. But the way the fixtures, especially on the weekend, how the results played out, obviously City losing at Bournemouth, Arsenal dropping points for the third game in a row, it does feel like all of a sudden there's a nice buffer there for Liverpool. All of a sudden, if they were to draw just one of those games, even a draw against Manchester City at Anfield, I think they probably are there for the taking at the minute. I mean, Bernardo Silva came out after their defeat to Sporting Lisbon last night, said something's wrong. So Slot probably feel that they are, in striking distance kind of thing, and they can maybe extend that lead at the top. But as I say, I always think those games against Manchester City, Anfield, you have to take advantage of, you have to win. But all of a sudden, Liverpool have given themselves a really healthy buffer. And obviously, of course, the game against Aston Villa on Saturday night at Anfield isn't going to be a walkover. But, I think Slot has managed this run of fixtures so far really well. As you talked about earlier, Tom, rotation has been key. All of a sudden, you've got Núñez, who's only played about 20 minutes last night, whatever. So he's coming fresh into the weekend. What has been your take on this kind of run of fixtures so far?
Yeah, he's managed it really well, and I thought obviously there was a little question mark when we came back from the last international break. Obviously the Forest game ended up getting beaten. I think obviously coming into the Chelsea game there was that little bit of worry. I thought that possibly we could slip up again, but yeah, I mean the results kind of speak for themselves, and we're just kind of churning out wins, which is great to see. And you would say in normal circumstances that will kind of be typical sort of title winning form. Obviously, we know what Man City and also Arsenal over the past couple of years have been capable of. So I think everyone's kind of holding their breath in that respect. But yeah, that first kind of chunk of fixtures, obviously we've kind of sailed through that. And now, you're looking at the next kind of set. So, the likes of Newcastle coming up. Obviously, Everton always poses a big challenge for Liverpool as well. It always did under Jurgen Klopp as well. So, yeah, it's one of those where I think, I feel we're kind of halfway through that block a little bit, but I think all eyes, certainly for me anyway, are on the kind of City and Real Madrid games, because I think they're again going to be massive kind of, statement kind of results. I think they'll kind of reverberate kind of around the league in terms of the City results, and obviously with Madrid. That could end up being kind of a dead rubber in some respect, which is odd to say, but again, that'd be a massive marker, I think, particularly in terms of our record down the years against Madrid, just to kind of set the record straight a little bit. So I think that the players will be fancying that one. Sort of at the end of the month, and obviously the City game, like you say, it's a massive opportunity. I think the amount of injuries they've got. Obviously, Pep said in the press, they've only kind of got 13 senior players right now. They'll probably have a couple back by the end of the month. But again, it seems like the momentum is with Liverpool at the moment, and you have to kind of take advantage of them moments in the season. And I think that, looking at a game at Anfield under the lights, it's a massive opportunity for Liverpool. I think any game really, and I think with the crowd behind us, that seems to be building as well, game in, game out. So yeah, it's a massive chance, and I think every time City come to Anfield, it does feel a bit of not a title decider, but a game that has a massive implication in the title race, and I think it will be again this season. So yeah, obviously, I think the players will be really up for that game, and they'll probably sense that opportunity as well. That you're able to kind of lay that massive glove on them at this stage in the season. So yeah, there's a lot of kind of tough games to come, but I think that first block of fixtures, I think we've dealt with really well.
Absolutely, it feels like City are at that stage now where they, I know they never start too well under Pep Guardiola do. They've always kind of they've been really strong in the second half of the season. I mean, that defeat to Bournemouth, I was reading the other day, was their first Premier League defeat since, I think, when they lost at Villa in late December. Or I think they might have lost against Palace, or did they draw against Palace? But it was basically their first loss since last December. And then obviously they go on this incredible 18-19 game not winning run, but unbeaten run in the second half of the season. It does feel like City are at that stage where, if you can maybe just give them another knock. And even on Saturday, before they even come to Anfield in a couple of weeks, they've got Brighton away, and all of a sudden the City are going into that, and they know they have to win. And, just think what that will do, to Anfield if City are to drop points in that Brighton game, with Liverpool being the later kick-off at 8 o'clock. I mean, there's no way Liverpool should be losing at home to Aston Villa, regardless of how good they've been. But it does feel like at the minute, City, as I say, they're on a bit of a wobble. And it just feels similar to 1920, I think, actually. I know it was the game, the win over Brighton on Saturday was actually 5 years to the day when they beat Aston Villa, when they came behind quite late. Robertson and Mane with the goods that day. It kind of caught. I mean, that day I remember City played Southampton and they were like, I think they were 1-1, or they might have been 1-0 down. And then they ended up winning 2-1. But obviously, Liverpool got those winning goals at Villa. And then the week later, they met at Anfield, and Liverpool were able to open a gap there. So it does feel quite significant. As I say, City are on a bit of a wobble, if you can maybe strike them then. But looking forward to that game on Saturday against Aston Villa, I mean, what kind of rotation would you be looking at? As you say, it's the final game before the international break. It's the 6th game of this block of 12-game fixtures. How many changes would you be looking to make? Obviously, we know there's injuries. Jota's obviously not going to be back. No Harvey Elliott. But, would you bring Robertson in? Would you be bringing Bradley in? Or would you be asking these players, Tsimikas and Trent, just to go again one final time before the international break?
Yeah, it's a tricky dilemma for the manager. I think, obviously, looking forward to the international break. Obviously, there was a couple who missed out last night, so I'd expect Núñez maybe to come in from the start again. And maybe Dominic Szoboszlai as well. He might get the nod, I think, in midfield again, just in terms of his running. And
he missed him last night, actually, to be honest.
Yeah.
As you say, he's kind of off the ball work. I don't think he's the goods in the final third as much as he would have liked to this season. But I think off the ball, obviously you get that endeavour from the likes of Jones and McAllister and Gravenberch, of course. But I just think Szoboszlai's such a willing runner, and especially last night when there was the free man from Leverkusen, I thought it was a game that really did scream out for Szoboszlai.
Yeah. He gives us that balance, I think, in midfield as well, where you've got three kind of defined roles, like we were hinting at there. And it kind of has parallels for me a little bit to kind of the role Jordan Henderson done. It's kind of at his pomp for Liverpool, where he was a great runner. He had that kind of athleticism, and it brings another dimension to the midfield. So, I think he might come in. Obviously, we know Villa can be dangerous, and they've got quite a strong side as well. But they're on kind of a little bit of a rough run of form. Obviously, they lost last weekend to Tottenham. I think they lost in the Cup as well before that. So, again, it might be an opportunity for Liverpool. Obviously, they'll want to kind of respond strongly, but I think it is a bit of an opportunity again to put a bit of a marker down. Obviously, it's a tough game, but being at Anfield, you'd expect Liverpool to come through that. But in terms of players who are going to come in, I wouldn't be surprised if Conor Bradley came in. Obviously he had a bit of a cameo role last night, didn't he, off the bench? Did pretty well. I'd expect Andy Robertson to come in just for that bit of experience as well. Obviously, Tsimikas has had a little bit of a run of games now. He came in, obviously, off the bench in the Arsenal game as well. I think possibly it's time for Robertson to come back in there as well. So, I'd expect kind of that spine to stay the same. Obviously, the centre-back pair and the goalkeeper, Mo Salah. And then there's maybe a decision to make on who kind of plays left wing. Is it Diaz? Is it Gakpo? But I guess that's kind of for the manager to decide. But, I'd expect Núñez to come back in, I think. And we'll kind of see from there kind of how it plays out.
And just in terms of Tsimikas there, you touched on, he's had a bit of a run of games. And I think I said it on the podcast with Matt last week that I think for the first time in a long time, watching Tsimikas, I think it was just after the Arsenal game, I said that he kind of brought a calming influence to the Liverpool defence, which I don't think I've ever said before about Tsimikas. He's kind of the complete opposite. He's maybe a bit erratic, maybe a bit Moreno-esque, but I think obviously Robertson's had a bit of a torrid time in recent weeks, hasn't he? He's obviously been up against difficult players, Madueke, and then obviously Saka at the Emirates. Would you say Tsimikas is now maybe not the undisputed number one, but would you say that he's maybe staked his claim and will probably be Slot's first choice based on what we've seen the last couple of weeks from him?
Yeah, he's been quite steady, hasn't he, in that back four? And I think there's a little bit of a less of an emphasis placed on kind of bombing forward and providing assists within the Slot team based on kind of what we came to expect under Klopp. And maybe that's kind of suiting his game a little bit, that he's able, a little bit like Trent, to kind of focus a bit more on that defensive side of his game. I think that's actually helping us as a defensive unit. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think past couple of weeks, maybe just to kind of bring Robertson out and give him that bit of a breather. Obviously, I think there's always that bit of pressure for Robertson anyway, with kind of, going away with Scotland. And, obviously he's the captain with Scotland as well. So, he plays a lot of games in that regard. And we've had 2 international breaks up until now already. So, yeah, I think it's been a great kind of rotation option for Slot early on in his tenure. And we've seen that kind of past couple of games. He has been, I think, quite solid defensively. Obviously, they had a goal chalked off last night that we mentioned earlier. There was a little bit of a mishap there, but I guess you need that bit of luck sometimes. And yeah, other than that, I think, Liverpool have been really defensively solid, haven't they? Kind of over the course of the season, and I'd expect that to continue as long as kind of you keep, I think, that centre back pairing fit. I thought they were excellent again last night, particularly Konate. He was probably man of the match for me. So yeah, I think defensively at the moment there just seems to be that solidity under Slot, and they just look really well coached. I think Tsimikas, it's been a kind of a bright spark, hasn't it? Kind of the past couple of weeks, it's been good to see. But yeah, we'll see whether he pumps for Robertson at the weekend, I guess.
Absolutely. I think you make a really good point there. Robertson's probably going to play both of Scotland's games, isn't he, in the international break? So maybe it might be a bit unfair to kind of throw him into this game on Anfield on Saturday night against Villa, who have got, tricky attacking players. Obviously, they've got Duran, who might drift into wide areas. They've got Morgan Rogers as well. He's obviously proven that he's probably one of the best up-and-coming talents in the Premier League at the moment. So, yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? But I think if it was me, I'd keep the back four the same as it is. I mean, as you say, that so far, Konate and Van Dijk, they've been absolutely brilliant. And I think they're breeding confidence across the whole back four. You saw that with Trent. I mean, even in the Brighton game last weekend, how he dealt with Matoma. I think a few seasons back, 22-23, Matoma gave him a torrid time at the Amex, in the league game and the cup game, I think. And he was absolutely on it, wasn't he, on Saturday, Trent? So, keep him of course. Tsimikas as well, I don't think there's any point changing. He's probably got that rhythm. We know what Villa are going to be like. I think, as you say, midfielders, it's difficult, isn't it? Because, based on probably performance, you'll probably see McAllister probably been the quietest in recent weeks, but then it also feels like he's your metronome at times. So it's like if you take him out, do you lose that kind of control? Especially if you bring in someone like Szoboszlai, who's offers different qualities, doesn't he? As we said, he's more off the ball than on the ball in terms of his influence at the moment. So, I wouldn't be surprised again if he kind of left the midfield as is. I mean, Liverpool playing at home on Tuesday night, and it's a Saturday night kickoff, so there's no travel involved. There's no kind of brutal turnaround in terms of flights and checking in and all that kind of thing. So I think it could actually suit Liverpool. Especially with Villa. I mean, they're playing away in Europe on Wednesday night, and obviously by the time they get back probably on Thursday, then they're probably up to Anfield or to Liverpool on Friday. So it's a much tougher turnaround for them. So I won't be surprised if that kind of, they've got obviously the goalkeeper stays in the back four, the midfield three, and then I think the only change you might see is Nunes come in. I think Nunes probably comes in for Gakpo and Diaz goes out wide. But as you say, it's kind of horses for courses at the minute. I mean, Diaz's first half last night, I don't think he was as electric, and probably I saw a few people on social media saying maybe it hasn't worked, but then all of a sudden he ends again with a hat-trick. So goals breed confidence, and Diaz is enjoying a really strong start to the season, so it would feel a bit harsh to take him out. But as you touched on at the top of the show, I mean, when you've got Gakpo firing 4 goals in 6 days and Diaz firing a 30-minute hat-trick, I mean, whoever's going to be playing, you're going to be confident they can do the business, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the moment, it just seems like, I think we're 16 games in, aren't we, under Slot, 14 wins. I mean, it couldn't have gone much better, really. And yeah, long may it, from a fan's point of view, kind of long may it continue. And, kind of that forward line at the moment just seems to be kind of gelling even more. Obviously, they played together for a number of years now. But yeah, it just seems like this kind of new era is starting to kind of, really take shape under Slot. So, yeah, obviously heading into the international break, maybe he might gamble a little bit in terms of his selection, maybe get that one last push out to certain players there. But yeah, like you said, I think possibly Nunes comes back in and then he's got a bit of a decision to make on that left-hand side. But very difficult decision given how well both of them are playing, obviously Diaz and Gakpo. But yeah, I guess that's why he earns the money. So yeah,
Absolutely.
we'll see.
And Tom, if I was to ask you for a score prediction for Saturday night, Liverpool versus Aston Villa, what are you going to say?
Do you know, I fancy Liverpool. I think we're just on such a great run, and obviously Villa, they've had a bit of a torrid run of late. So I think 2-1. I reckon. Liverpool.
Absolutely. I'm going to go 2-0. Liverpool defensively sharp at back once again. Another clean sheet for Konate and Van Dijk. But that's all from us today on the Liverpool.com podcast. We'll be back next week to preview Liverpool's Premier League game review Liverpool's game against Aston Villa and bring you all the latest news during that international break. But thank you for joining myself and Tom Beattie.